Hello, grade 7s. Today, we will be speaking about West Africa before the European slave trade, as well as the nature of slavery in West Africa before the arrival of the Europeans. This is a history lesson, lessons 6 and 7 for the grade 7s. Firstly, we have to look at West Africa and the three empires that stand out. I wonder if you can remember the three empires from your grade 6 work. The first one is the Ghana Empire. The Ghana Empire was established in the 8th century AD by the Soninke and Mande tribes that lived near the city of Kombi Shale. It was a pinnacle of trade in that area, and after 880 AD, the region expanded rapidly to also include West Sudan. From the 10th century, Islam also expanded increasingly. However, the empire came to a fall in the 11th century because of internal politics and trade competition against bigger and wealthier countries. A large number of countries started to infiltrate the West Africa. The next one we find is the Mali Empire. This was a powerful empire with a complicated form of government. The Soso Empire brought the Ghana Empire to a fall, and they were in turn defeated by the Mandinka, who established the Mali Empire in 1240. Under the leadership of Prince Sundiata and his successors, the Mali Empire was expanded so that it eventually included most of West Africa. Mali was developed into the cultural and educational empire of its time, and Timbuktu was regarded as the city of learning, and travelers and students flocked there to further their education. If you can remember any of your grade 6 work, you will know that the University of Timbuktu was established and built by Mansa Musa. The next empire we find is the Songhai Empire. Mansa Musa's successors could not maintain the empire, and consequently the empire disintegrated. Eventually trade moved to the city of Gao. Under the leadership of Sani Ali, the Songhai of Gao formed the Songhai Empire. At the end of the 15th century, Songhai was the dominant empire in West Africa. Under the leadership of Askia Muhammad I, the empire once again took the lead in trade, learning, and Islam in West Africa. But because of civil war over the legitimate heir to the throne, the strong empire was invaded by Morocco in 1591. This finally brought an end to the West African trade, education, and the advancement of Islam. Next, we will look at slaves in West Africa. At first, slavery in West Africa was regarded as a way to settle debt rather than being personal property. With the increase of Arab and Atlantic slave trade, the local slave system changed to provide also for the demands for slaves outside of borders of Africa. The various applications of slavery were influenced by local customs, the Roman influence, and the influence of Christianity and Islam. The original slave system in historical West Africa did not really match the definition of slaves as it was generally understood in Europe and in the rest of the world. Different kinds of slavery were applied in different parts of the world. We will now take a look at some of the different types of slaves that were found during that time. Different kinds of slave trade were found in ancient Africa. The first we see is slaves as property. The slaves were regarded and treated as property. The owners could sell and buy slaves as he wished, and therefore the children of slaves were also regarded as the property of the owner. It's not clear from the time before Islam to what extent this type of slavery was practiced in West Africa. The next one we find is house slaves. House slaves worked mostly in the homes of their owners and enjoyed a certain degree of freedom. The slaves were regarded as part of the property of the house owner, but were sold only in extraordinary circumstances. These slaves were allowed to earn money from their labor that they made available to other people in the community. They could use the money for their personal gain by acquiring property or possessions that they could then give to their families and children. The next one we find is bonded slaves. The slaves were used as security to ensure that outstanding debt was settled. This type of slavery had certain limitations. Specific conditions were attached to these agreements, which could include directives of the type of work and the period of work. The directives also prevented such a person being sold in slavery. This type of slavery was a common practice in West Africa before the arrival of the Europeans. Then lastly, we find military slaves. These slaves were exclusively for compulsory military service. They could be owned by a government or military commander and sent out to conduct war and return the loot for financial and political gain. The system was successfully implemented by Muslims and the West Africa states, particularly in the Nile Valley. That concludes your lesson 6 and 7 of history.